Well, welcome back to Whole Bible Study, continuing the discussion. I'm Inoue, and I'm grateful you're here for this deeper look into Exodus chapter 5. In our main reading, we saw Moses step into the tension between divine calling and human resistance. Now let's slow down and explore some of the deeper cultural, theological, and historical layers behind what just happened. There's so much to unpack, not just in what Moses says or does, but in how Pharaoh responds and what that reveals about spiritual and political systems in play. Let's begin with Pharaoh's question. Who is Yahweh that I should obey him? This wasn't just ignorance. It was theological arrogance. In ancient Egypt, Pharaoh was believed to be the divine son of Ra, the sun god, and functioned as both political leader and religious figure. So when Moses invokes the name Yahweh, a god Pharaoh does not recognize, it's more than just a foreign name. It's a challenge to the entire religious and political structure of Egypt. In the ancient Near Eastern context, deities were tied to geographic regions and people groups. Pharaoh's question is a rejection of Yahweh's authority over Egypt and its gods. And yet, embedded in his scuffling is a tragic story. Pharaoh is about to come to know Yahweh, not in friendship or faith, but in judgment. Let's talk about bricks for a moment. The reference to brick making is not metaphorical. It's economic and archaeological. Excavations in Egypt, especially from the Ramesside period, likely the time of the Exodus or close to it, show mud brick constructed as a central to the Egyptian society. These bricks were made of Nile mud, straw, and water, mixed together and dried in the sun. Straw acted like rebar to modern concrete. In modern concrete, it gave structural integrity. Pharaoh's removal of straw wasn't just cruel, it was calculated sabotage. He didn't change the expectations. He just made success impossible. That kind of systemic oppression shows how deeply Egypt depended on controlling laborers. Ancient records from papyri, Anastasia, and other sources even describe quotas for brickmaking and the punishment of laborers who fell short. What the Bible describes is consistent with that archaeology, with what archaeology shows up. Pharaoh's brutality was both real and institutional. Another key detail is Pharaoh's accusation of laziness. You are lazy. That's why you want to sacrifice to your God. In modern terms, this is the classic gaslighting. The enslaved are blamed for their suffering. Their desire to worship is framed as idleness. But here's what's powerful. Pharaoh's accusation of laziness is actually a twisted recognition of spiritual hunger. He sees the people's desire to connect with their God, but instead of honoring it, he weaponizes it. It reminds me of how spiritual desire is often misunderstood by the world, treated as weakness, distraction, or foolishness. But the Bible tells us that the desire to worship is not laziness. It's sacred longing. Let's shift now to Moses' response for a moment. When things go terribly wrong, he turns to God in frustration. Why have you brought trouble on this people? In Hebrew, the word for trouble is ra'ah, which is often used for moral evil or deep harm. This is not polite questioning. This is lament. This is protest. This is a broken man crying out to a faithful God. And I want to say this clearly. This kind of honesty is welcome in the life of faith. The Psalms are full of it, and prophets embody it. Even Jesus in Gethsemane models it. Sometimes our greatest acts of faith are not songs of praise, but cries of confusion. God doesn't flinch when Moses questions him. He listens, and he answers in the next chapter. But first, he lets Moses wrestle. Culturally, this chapter also reveals the deep psychological damage of slavery. The Israelite foremen, who were likely given small leadership roles to manage their own people, turn on Moses and Aaron. You have made us stink in Pharaoh's sight, they say. In Hebrew, the phrase havashatem etek rakenu, literally, you have made our smell offensive. It's visceral language. They feel shamed, exposed, and endangered. They aren't just afraid of Pharaoh, they're internalizing their oppression. This is what generations of slavery do. They convince you that survival is safer than freedom. That familiarity, even if cruel, is better than risk. And when deliverance starts to disrupt the system, it doesn't always feel like hope. It feels like chaos. That's something we all need to remember. When God begins to move, the first step might feel like disorder before it feels like deliverance. Now, I want to pause and reflect on a deeper spiritual message. Exodus 5 shows us that obedience to God often leads directly into hardship, not away from it. We love the stories where faith leads to miracles, and those are coming. But right here, Moses obeys and things get worse. Why? Because confronting injustice threatens power. Because spiritual breakthroughs often provoke backlash. Because freedom, real freedom, always starts with resistance. And sometimes that resistance feels like failure. But God is not absent. He's working behind the scenes. He's hardening Pharaoh's heart, not to destroy Moses, but to reveal his own glory. And that takes time. And now one final historical insight before we close. There is growing scholarly discussion among the political theology of Exodus. Some scholars argue that this book is not only a story of deliverance, but a radical manifesto against empire. Egyptian society was structured on hierarchy, divine kingship, and enforced labor. Yahweh's claim that he alone is worthy of worship and that every human being deserves rest, dignity, and freedom stands in complete opposition to Pharaoh's regime. The Sabbath, introduced later, becomes a revolutionary concept, one that says you are not defined by how much you produce, you are defined by who your God is. Exodus is not just spiritual, it's political, it's moral, it's deeply subversive in the best way. So as we wrestle with this chapter, here's my heart for you. Don't be discouraged if your obedience leads to more resistance. That doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It might mean you're finally disrupting the system. God doesn't promise ease, he promises presence. And just like Moses, we are allowed to cry out, question, and even doubt, because he meets us in the midst of that pain with power and patience and love. Thank you for staying with me through this deeper reflection. If something spoke to your heart today, if you saw a layer I missed or connected to something in your own journey, I'd love to hear it. Drop a comment or insight, and let's keep growing together. You're not alone in this. You are seen, you are valued, and the God who called Moses still calls us today. See you in the next episode.